Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Stan Lee's DC. Today we begin looking at a character that is neither Batman nor Superman, which some consider a rather rare occurrence back in 2001, let alone today. Alongside Dave Gibbons, Dick Giordano, and Alex Sinclair, let's look at Stan Lee creating Green Lantern, and see if this story makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. Like the Superman and Wonder Woman covers before it, this one has the main character stand in the center, with panels featuring elements from the story, though this time they're separated from energy that is emanating from GL's chest. Wow, when Dr. Manhattan wants to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, he really goes all out. We begin with Dominic Dark getting some privacy from his followers within the Church of Eternal Empowerment, magically contacting his minion, Crag Krogor. No offense to Stan Lee, but he really got himself in his own special little rut of how he named certain villains. Hard K's, a lot of G's and R's. Heck, writing the Superman review, whenever I typed Gorok's name, I had to stop for a second because I'd be thinking of Korgo, the convict from the Batman comic. Now with Krogor, these guys' names are practically anagrams of each other. And with 9 other books to read, I doubt this will be the last example. Playing Scrabble with Stan must have been equal parts fun and confusing. Dark is upset that Krogor has yet to find some item, attacks one of his men, and vaguely threatens Crag before ending communications. "Find it, Crag Krogor, for well you know the penalty for failure. It must be found! Only I am destined to have it, and have it I shall." Beware the mystical machinations and magical might of Dominic Dark, and his incredible, insidious ability to put things on layaway. At Los Angeles University, students gather around Professor Lewis, who makes archaeology fun by leaning against the front desk casually while looking all man-pretty. He fires off a bunch of speculative ideas about historical periods having alien influence and the possibility of real magic, like Aladdin's fabled lamp. So I guess we should expect that classic Disney animated film to show up on the History Channel, huh? Wait, that's actually a possibility these days. Anyway, I noticed that there was a weird box around the word had here. I imagine it happened during the editing process, but heck if I know what, why, or how. A young woman suspects there's more to this rambling, but we're taken to Africa, where Krogor's workers are tearing down trees and shooting wildlife, as well as police officers that catch them on the nature preserve. They toss the bodies off a cliff and proceed to look for the mysterious MacGuffin, intending to find it by nightfall, or else. I'm sorry, ever since I made that Aladdin joke, I've had Friend Like Me running through my head. Back at the university, the woman from earlier, Kathy Warren, walks into Lewis's office. Naturally, he noticed her at all his lectures because she's oh so attractive, which is kinda thin ice for a professor to mention. She's a student, dude, back off. Fortunately, he's on his way to Africa to find the Tree of Life, something mentioned in every religion, though known by many different names. The best place to find it may well be the cradle of mankind. As he takes off in a taxi, Kathy makes a call, asking for orders about someone suspecting the truth. "Ma'am, for the last time, this is a Pizza Hut, and we've asked you to stop placing your orders like that." In Africa, some of Krogor's more local hires refuse to venture into an area shrouded in green mist, alleged to be cursed. Others begin thinking that a second thought may be in order, given this patch of land isn't on their maps, but Crag Krogor don't stop for nothing! Is it weird that this guy is only ever named by both names so far? Kinda seems weird. This isn't King of the Hill and you're not John Redcorn. Anyway, he tests what he thinks is quicksand with a tree branch, but the mist pulls it away. The next logical step is to remotely send in a bulldozer, but the mist disassembles it before their eyes, and then they decide to hightail it.
No disassemble.
Big tough Crag don't stop for nothing, but Ghostbuster-style shenanigans apparently get him to make a great big U-turn. Professor Lewis is at the airport when Kathy shows up, but not by coincidence. "I'll level with you. Your lecture really turned me on."
Phrasing?
Did no one happen to mention to Stan how that could have been taken out of context, or did he know and not care? Well, she said she really wanted to join him, but on the chance he'd say no, bought her own plane ticket, because there's nothing suspicious about how a college student could afford a spontaneous flight out of the country. Hey, you're gorgeous and I'm a guy. I figure this is my lucky day. Knocking that creep meter up another notch, I see. The plane takes off despite reports of geographical upheaval and malfunctioning weather satellites. Probably nothing to worry about, I'm sure. And the prof decides to drop formalities by having a student call him by his first name, Len. His middle name is probably Lawsuit Happy.
No, not Lenny.
Elsewhere, Dark is pulling an Emperor Snoke, projecting a great big hologram, saying his wrath is worse than any curse from the Green Mist. Not unlike Crag's threat to some of his men earlier. He orders them back to the spooky spot because that's likely where the MacGuffin is. Then we go to Kathy and Len trying to procure a ride. A coincidence, just like any coincidence, because it makes it easier to tell our tale.
At least Stan was honest when he took shortcuts in silly little stories. Some writers these days seem to want to try and pass their laziness off as something groundbreaking and important. And those writers should be fired. Out of a cannon.
No one is willing to guide them there, so the two go it alone, taking half a day to reach the misty green wood. Lewis needs to take a closer look at the supposed mud, as it seems to be alive, when Krogor shows up, grabs Kathy while making certain remarks about her looks not unlike Len's, then shoots the professor, sending him into the mud.
Not Lenny.
That's when Kathy starts scolding Krogor, rather knowingly, saying that their only shot at finding what they're after is now gone, and Dark will punish them. But Crag figures they'll eventually find the thing, whatever it is, so do they know each other already? Was the crack about his team missing a pretty little filly just to put on for the professor's sake? If so, that's kind of weird. Anyway, Len figures he's either somehow breathing in green slime or he's dead, only to be corrected telepathically by the Tree of Life, which keeps him alive. There, let tendrils and creepers spread healing juices upon thee.
As weird as it sounds, Welch's could very well make a mint on cranapple healing juices. Or, at least grape.
While he's healed and Roots pick his nose, the teacher becomes a student as Yggdrasil explains that some beings from space were fleeing a cosmic disaster and wound up on Earth, legitimizing Len's earlier theories, but since then mankind's been dropping the ball something fierce, what with pollution, whaling, deforestation, the usual, and is on the brink of self-destruction. His vision also apparently includes Reverend Dark and his current crony. Not Kathy, though, so you gotta wonder what that tree really knows. Both thy body and thy mind have I probed.
Phrasing.
I find thee pure in spirit and courageous of heart. I guess the tree is giving him pass for making a pass on one of his students. So Yggdrasil transfers his spirit into the man, leaving the tree and infusing Len with its immense power. He changes into a green form, saying it's like a glowing green lantern, and that's the name Yggdrasil says he'll go by from now on, as he protects the planet. He returns to human form, healed, and sees the land change in the spirit's absence, as if it has completed a task.
So he gets his superhero name because the tree's life force thought a random and obscure analogy had a nice ring to it. Good thing he didn't think he glowed like a radioactive nudist, or this could have become a very different comic.
He figures thinking on this all too much might make him go bonkers, then remembers he hasn't sexually harassed his student in about 5 minutes, needing to get out of the woods and find Kathy. The mere thought sends him in the air in lantern form, and he reverts back to human upon landing. He's soon beset by Krogor, who wants to know how he survived and what he found. Then Kathy shows up with a rifle she snagged while everyone slept. So I guess it's been a few hours? And she talks about tying up just Crag, then leaves with Len, but no indication that Crag was ever tied up. He just gloats that this was part of the plan amongst his buddies. In the woods, Kathy wants to know what happened to Len. He wants to know what her connection to her abductor is, and neither of them are getting any answers. With the goons closing in, Lewis puts a rock in his satchel and throws it in the river, correctly assuming that Krogor is dumb enough to think their MacGuffin is inside, so he and Kathy can escape. Returning to the States, it seems the unrest in both weather and geology have ceased, though it seems to be beginning between the two passengers. All Len can say is that what he found in the bog was more like an emotion, and Kathy proceeds to brush him off, feeling like her entire trip was a waste. He kept the truth from her on instinct, feeling she was more interested in the bog than him.
How can that be? The bog isn't her teacher that makes inappropriate comments about how attractive she is. She must be evil!
She calls Dark, saying she did her best but couldn't get any information. Unlike current DC Comics, he doesn't think A for effort makes incompetence more acceptable, so he tells her to eliminate the professor, and cancels a sermon so he can muse about acquiring the lantern. So has the power already been known as Green Lantern long before this? I mean, I guess so, since he mentions it again when he teleports Krogor to him, and Crag seems to immediately know he's talking about a guy and not, an actual lantern of some kind. How strangely cognizant of him. But to hasten his search, Dark curses him with rapid aging, killing him in 2 months unless he succeeds, so the Reverend's cosmic plans may come to pass.
He's gonna try filming his own Star Wars movies to spite the current trilogy, isn't he? Gotta say, Dark, that sounds really petty.
Lewis is in his office when he gets a call from Miss Warren, wanting to meet up. On his way to meet her, he spots a mugging and figures that's a good enough reason as any to test out his new powers. After a reference to Superman and the original Captain Marvel, he incapacitates the crook with an energy blast, leaving the man he saved thinking he's gone nuts and taking off. Though one eyewitness intends to tell the media she saw a miracle, Len returns to normal. Yes, I see another Till typo. Just as Kathy drives by, planning on shooting him for her evil master. It should be pretty easy since he's so distracted by the cosmic significance of his alter ego, but police and news crews show up in response to the mugging from, 2 seconds earlier, so not only has murder got to be shelved, but these cops and news crews are really quick. Though it's not all great for the newbie hero. The guy he blasted was an undercover detective, and the man he saved was a drug lord they've been tracking. I must never forget. Power misused is justice abused.
Looks like Stan cooked up a cornier version of his power and responsibility speech. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some honest-to-goodness truth to it, but I guess there's something about the rhyme scheme that makes it difficult for me to take as seriously as Spider-Man's famous oath.
The witness is interviewed by the news, describing Green Lantern as a monster and saying everyone is doomed, which is a complete 180 from what she said earlier about this being a miracle. The news anchor goes on to say that Reverend Dark is looking for a missing African artifact, while Len concludes it's best to keep his identity secret since men will continue pursuing the power he possesses. Meanwhile, Dark is growing impatient, though there's no indication of how much time has passed since he cursed Crag. He decides to draw GL out with a giant monster to threaten Los Angeles. Krogor will be controlling the beast, since Dominic is but a humble preacher.
Then what was the point of making your goon age 1 year each day? He basically gave him 2 months to finish the job, but we don't know how long he's been waiting, so this whole impatience thing falls a little flat.
Len tests his powers out in the desert to get a grasp on his limitations, and when using his powers begins taking more and more energy with weaker effects, he realizes the lantern needs to recharge. Wink, wink. Days later, after he's concluded a lecture, Kathy is seen with her gun in her bag, somehow no one noticing this, and she deduces he must be the Green Lantern, and decides to capture him and deliver him to Dark personally. After she follows him outside, a rumbling is felt, coming from a display for a monster movie called Gargantua. The red and therefore legally distinct monster display comes to life and begins crushing everything in its wake. First comes shock, then disbelief.
Then comes baby in the baby carriage. Wait a minute.
With people running in a panic, Leonard ducks into an alley only for Kathy to pull her gun and warn him not to move. He recognizes her voice, but doesn't seem to react to the fact that she's holding him up for some reason, so he transforms and flies off. Witnessing his change makes the woman question her allegiance to the evil Reverend, wondering how she could have betrayed a demigod. Technically, she betrayed him while he was still human, so maybe she shouldn't feel too bad? Lantern gets the monster to pay attention to him, though the lighting makes him look less legally distinct in this shot, and its tail hits a conveniently abandoned building. He manages to reduce the falling rubble to dust to protect the innocents, but it's unclear if he's altering matter like Firestorm or using his energy to just pulverize it. Kathy, meanwhile, thinks she can convince Dark to call off his quest for the power of Yggdrasil, only to trip on debris and wind up underfoot. Under Monster Foot, specifically. GL's energy blast holds it off long enough to get her to safety and return to the fight before she can confess the truth. "That's the man I tried to betray? How will I ever be able to live with myself?"
Well, he's also the man that behaved like a flirty dingus when he figured you were nothing more than an impulsive and impressionable college girl in his class. I'm not saying it justifies her betrayal or anything, but if she's trying to find a way to live with herself, well, it's kind of a start.
Lantern cuts Redzilla in half, but Dark, watching through his magic holograms, has the mechanical menace try to grab him. Kathy, approaching to seek forgiveness, warns him and gets in the way, getting caught instead. "No! He's crushing you!" Yeah, I think she knows, dude. Len starts blasting the abdomen further until it's inactive, and she's released, but it's too late. She says he was the best thing that ever happened to her. Sounds like quite the exaggeration, but okay. Then apologizes before dying. Naturally, this is the perfect time for a reporter to try and snag an interview. But, of course, GL's not having it. "Please get out of my space!" Kind of a weird thing to say, unless he's talking about the social media site. Anyway, he flies off and is led by the Lantern's Glow, an extension of his power never before mentioned, to an abandoned building. He crashes in, finding Krogor, the controls for the monster, and his goons, fighting them briefly before his power drains and he's captured, though not reverting to human form as he did in the desert.
Bad news about Lenny.
At first, it does seem rather inconsistent, but it could be argued that he doesn't have the power to fight off 4 or 5 henchmen, but manages to retain just enough to keep his green going. So long as he doesn't exert himself too much, his identity remains in the clear.
Goons mention how glad this will make the Reverend, but Krogor has other plans. Having feared Dark for so long, he figures they can force the Lantern to give his power to them, and they can take over. Playing along, GL has them drive for several hours, allegedly taking them to a place he can show how to do what he does. Once recharged, he bursts out of the car, shrugs off their bullets, then knocks them down with an energy wave. He singles out Krogor, asking him who gives him his marching orders.
They mentioned a reverend called Dark in the context that they worked for him and wanted the power to overthrow him. Did giving all those lectures stunt your ability to listen, or are you just stupid?
In any event, Crag begins aging even faster, his curse accelerated by his Dark Master, too quickly for Len to get any answers, and in seconds the henchman is reduced to a skeleton, as Dark watches and swears revenge on Lantern for taking the power he sought. GL flies into the sky, figuring everything happens for a reason, including his inheritance of this immense power, and hopes he'll continue to be worthy of it.
Lenny!
And even though Kathy betrayed me, I'll show I'm the bigger man by making sure her roommate gets A's for the rest of the semester after I explain to everyone the details of her grisly death.
In this edition of On the Street, we catch up with that detective who was working undercover and stopped by Green Lantern. He's Kevin King, an apparent legend on the force, who's being checked out by EMTs as some guy in a trench coat starts narking about if he really is the noteworthy detective, even mentioning he was supposed to have been gunned down on a different case. He thinks his badge doesn't matter anyway, what with the recent uptick in superhero activity, relegating cops to little more than dinosaurs. The, frankly, bewildering exchange agitates King, so he's off to catch the drug dealer solo. Get real! Let that Green Lantern do it! You can't compete with him!
Yes, every cop should immediately quit their job because Los Angeles has seen a handful of people with superpowers deal with precisely one newsworthy threat apiece. These are the rational words of someone serious about their jobs. How are no other cops indignant over this?
He's gone to a dive bar to chat with Louis, a hustler that's usually kept information to himself, but with super types flying around making his job riskier, he's all too happy to give up his boss's address. I'm sure that'll end well for him. You know how understanding drug dealers are. You know what they say, snitches get hugs and kisses. Later, he's walking down a damaged street, something considered now typical with capes around, when he spots a looter and tackles him. He doesn't put up a fight, preferring a cop to, a superhero. Like his inner monologue said, it's making things too easy.
Too easy. Wait a minute.
King leaves the thief to another officer and continues to the location of the drug lord, only to come upon an apartment complex on fire. He reasons because a gas main ruptured in Green Lantern's fight with Gargantua. A small child can be seen still inside, but no one's doing anything because it's assumed a super will show up and deal with it. King rushes in, grabs the girl, and makes it out, to the apparent disappointment to onlookers who wanted to see a superhero in action. Instead of punching whoever said that, as he'd be right to, as firefighters arrive, King wonders if maybe his captain had a point about leaving the job to supers, which makes those statements all the more baffling if they came from a superior officer. He decides to call it a night because who needs to stop that drug lord anyway, and considers quitting altogether. He returns to the precinct, finding a large gathering of people standing outside. Inspired by King's rescue of the little girl, they want to join the force because being a hero doesn't require superpowers. "You're a cop? You think we have a chance?" "Son, the world might have a chance now. Unlike the dinosaurs."
That's not a meteor headed our way, is it? So that was Stan Lee's Green Lantern. In some ways, it seems more a nod to the Alan Scott original interpretation of the character.
One example, the green flame did crash into the Earth from space.
I'd call the story something of a mixed bag, but not terrible.
Maybe it was a clumsy attempt at starting some kind of romance, but a professor commenting on how hot he finds his students isn't exactly a positive trait. Though that seemed to stop after Len gets his powers, though it's unclear if they or the experience changed him, or his suspicions of Kathy. Otherwise, he did seem genuinely enthused about archaeology, if perhaps enamored by ancient alien-type theories. It was good to see Dark do something after 4 installments, be fairly active, though still quite the puppet master. However, it didn't seem to make sense to curse Krogor the way he did when we didn't see him age until that interrogation, and even then it was something accelerated by Dark. So why not just leave it at that spot at the end? Kathy's turn was shaky. I get that seeing GL in action could have changed something about her, especially after he saves her, but if she's so keenly aware of Dark's abilities, as implied, I'd think it would have been more of a struggle. This Green Lantern's powers were neat but kind of vague, relegated to flying around, changing form, and energy blasts. So far, that is. Minor spoiler alert, he does show up again in a couple more installments.
The On the Streets segment, while having something of a shaky start, had a very good premise. Not simply that it showed criminals being a bit more cooperative so as to avoid punishment from more powerful forces than the police, but more interestingly was its consideration of how expecting super types to solve every single problem can lead to a dangerous form of apathy, and how a regular person can still contribute to the common good. And that's a pretty good note to end on. Next week, a certain speedster gets remade to be a lot less scarlet. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.